have to have a very strong military. We cannot accept cuts as continually seems to happen. And we must, as residents and as citizens of this country, we must support fully the military. And anytime they're engaged, however you feel one way or the other about that, we must support that military. Another entity is local law enforcement. In today's world, with the enemy living amongst us, we must have very strong local law enforcement as well. And for years that has also been under attack and with cuts. But I'm glad to tell you that this year we are rebuilding, we are coming back, and we are making great strides in order to protect you out there. It's not been easy, but you know, the rights that we have continue to be eroded. Even federal judges sometimes erode our rights. But let me tell you, this will always, always be one country under God. We hear a lot today about something called Homeland Security. Someone thought that they were coming up with a new term. Well, let me tell you about the original Homeland Security was the Second Amendment rights that we have to keep and bear arms. And we have to keep that strong. That continues to be eroded today, and they're very smart about it because they do it just a little bit at a time where it doesn't really affect us tremendously or it doesn't affect everyone, so they just kind of let it slide. And a little bit at a time and a little bit at a time, and one day we're going to wake up and we're not going to have those rights. We have to fight them at every step. Yes, I was in Uganda, in East Africa, helping to rebuild the national police force after Idi Amin and all the other dictators that followed him had raped the country. They now have a president that's elected and the first lady of that country, who are both very strong Christian people, and the country is rebuilding. But while I was there, one thing I noticed is that very common every day was home invasions. Criminals would just break in at homes at will, take the people, if they were there, hostage, take everything they had. I asked them, I said, what do you think would happen if the criminals in this country knew that every home had guns and they were armed? Oh, well, I don't think they'd be doing those things. I said, I don't either. That's why in America that we have to protect those rights and that we have to protect that Second Amendment. So I am here tonight to remind us all that even when it's just a little bit, we have to fight for that. And if we just keep letting it slip away and slip away, pretty soon it will all be gone. So let's support the military fully. God bless you. God bless America.
He sends his regrets, but he did send a statement that I would like to read this time. He said, please accept my regrets that I could not be present tonight, as again we reflect on the events of September 11, 2001. I remember explicitly I had just reached the bottom of Red Rock Canyon while en route to Bakersfield when I heard of the first aircraft impacting the World Trade Center. My first thoughts focused on weather and how tragic if an aircraft inadvertently flew into the building because of bad weather, similar to an event at the Empire State Building several decades earlier. A few minutes later, I heard of the second aircraft. It was at that time I knew that what was unfolding was not an accident, but a coordinated attack on American soil against innocent American citizens. Like most, my world was shaken in a manner I'd never anticipated, and like most, my emotions went from concern and compassion, thinking a tragic accident, to anger and rage at the depravity of those who hate us so much that they resort to killing innocent civilians. Today, 4 years later, America has said enough. Our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Guardsmen, and reservists are waging war against those who would kill us for no reason other than they detest our freedom to speak, act, worship in a manner that does not follow their perverted beliefs, that subjugate speech, worship, human rights, women's rights, and most forms of life in a civilized society. General Tommy Frank summed up fairly accurately, I believe. We can either fight them there at the source with our trained military, or we can fight them here where innocent civilians will be the target. My thanks and deep appreciation to our men and women in uniform who at this moment are on duty, standing guard to protect our freedoms. Our eternal gratitude and thanks. Signed, County Supervisor John McQuiston. We're again fortunate to have a speaker that appeared with us last year. Lieutenant Colonel David Smith is the Deputy Director of Project Management, 412th Test Wing, and an experimental test flight radar navigator attached to the 419th Test Squadron at Edwards Air Force Base. That's a mouthful. I didn't think I was going to be able to get that one out. You know, Colonel Smith's accomplishments is a long one. There's one thing that really stood out, and I mentioned this last year, and I'm going to mention it again because it impressed me a lot. And this is when he was at Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington. Colonel Smith was the lead navigator for the wing in the Strategic Air Command 1986 bombing and navigation competition. This resulted in winning of 9 of 11 awards, including the coveted Fairchild Trophy. This was an event, an achievement I should say, recognized by President Ronald Reagan. After hearing Colonel Smith speak at last year's rally, this year I phoned the Public Affairs Office at Edwards Air Force Base, hoping that he would still be there, and he was. And tonight we're again very fortunate to have him with us. Please welcome Lieutenant Colonel David Smith.
You know, it's a fabulous introduction. It's puzzling to me that it's about me. I'll tell you what it's really about, though. It's about it's about my father. Because my father gave me very good advice when I wound up going into the United States Air Force. I went into the Air Force late. I was 27 years old. I had an interesting job. I was a product rep, a marketing rep for Jack Daniel's Distillery in Hawaii. It was a tough job. Someone had to do it. And I was caught up in a corporate right-sizing. That's business speak for you're fired. And that day that I got the call from the distillery from Lynchburg, Tennessee saying, we think it'd be a real good idea for you to start looking for another job, I received a little Aim High brochure in the mail. And to this day, I think the Lord reached out and tapped me on the shoulder and said, I have a plan for you. So I went to my dad and I counseled with him, and he said, you ought to take advantage of this, but to be a success, my father was career Army. He said, what you need to do is surround yourself with great NCOs.